Hello all, this is the Happy Career Guru channel and I'm Prasad. Now, since the last 4 to 5 months, when I started talking about career conversations in Happy Career Guru, I always focused on one topic, you. The point is very simple. I always believe that the only thing that we can control at this moment in time when you're going into your work is how you act in a particular situation. You may or may not control the context in which you're working, right? So in the recent past, through a common connection, I met our guest for today, Jason Butler. I saw his posts on LinkedIn and I was very intrigued by one thing that he actually shared during that one of his posts in LinkedIn. He shared this thing called the Bento Model. Now, if you think about the Bento Model, if any of you know those small Japanese tiffin boxes you get, it's like the compartmentalized activity that you can, the compartmentalized box that you have where you can have different kinds of foods that you put in place. So this Bento model also talks about the individual in that way. So let me introduce a little bit of Jason. Jason has 20 years in leadership and executive experience. He is a community leader and a nonprofit executive, and he's currently started this executive coaching activity with his new model called the Village Mindset Model. He has a master's in intercultural studies. He's got a doctorate in Duke in organizational leadership, and he's working on the MBA. Actually, he's completed his MBA in NC State in Jenkins School of Business. Through his work, he helps leaders strengthen their cultures. And we're going to talk a little bit about not just the Bento model, but the village mindset model that Jason came up with. Jason, welcome to Happy Career Guru.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be on with you today.
Yeah, so when I was looking at that particular post that you had done specific to the Bento model, what intrigued me was the connection that it actually had with some of the themes that I was talking about, where I talk about the person. But when I talk about the person, I talk about the person as a point in time. What do you do in this moment in time? What was great about the model you talked about was where you made the point of that person as almost like on a axis of time. Can you talk a little bit more about the Bento model, where it came from, and why you find that useful for an individual in their journey of introspection and self-reflection?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So the Bento model, I must give credit where credit's due. And so it is my friend, actually, Yancey Strickler, who wrote a book called This Could Be Our Future. And Yancey was one of the co-founders of Kickstarter. So, we all have a famous friend, right? Like, this is my famous friend. We went to high school together, and when we were juniors in high school, we would go to lunch together back at my house and watch Sports Center and eat Chef Boyardee in my living room. And so, like, we're all buddies. And you know what? So his model, so he's got this beautiful sort of mindset because he founded Kickstarter, right? So he's always thinking about how do we function as a society, and how is my role impacting society, and how is society affecting me right now? And so, like, this spiraling up of mutual benefit and mutual relationship. And so, as you said, the Bento model is just like that Japanese sushi, right? So 4 little pieces. And so I have a little thing here, and you can see that when we talk about the bento, we have 4 squares. We have the now me, we have the future me, we have the now us, and the future us. And so lots of times, right, we get stuck in the now me, right? That's where our brains think most of the time, because now me is about security. It's about my needs, meeting my needs right now. And so our brains are wired evolutionarily to think about that, right? Like, that's where we are. And so, but we know from studies and from life that we're not islands. We're connected to other people, and we're not going to be in the right now all the time. And so, like, as you said, this is like an axis of self-interest going up and time coming out. And so when we're in the bottom left, now me, we're just thinking about the right now, what's good for my self-interest right now. And so what we find, right, is that's where most of us stay. And unfortunately, that's where most of our leaders stay, right, leading our companies. We think about what's good for our company right now. We need the profits right now. But if you look at the best companies, the most profitable companies, and the best leaders out there in the world that are making an impact, they're future us thinkers. They're the ones that are like, we need to be thinking about 5 years from now. We need to think about where we're going to be, and we need to track that out. We need to set our values. And so, like, when we talk about this, like, now me is about security. Now us is about community. It's about fairness. Future me is about my values. What values do I want to live into? What mastery do I want to, what career goals do I want to achieve, and how am I going to get there? And then future us is about sustainability. How do we get to where we're going? A lot of times we think about now us as community. It's about my family. Future us may be like our kids. Kind of think of it that way. Our legacies. So how are we investing in our children's lives? But not only our children, but how are we invested in the next generation? I think that's a huge conversation right now, especially like when we face these daunting challenges before us in the world of global inequality, of climate change. Like, if we're not thinking in future us, then we're in trouble, right?
Right.
And so, like, that's kind of the broad scope of how the bento model works. And so we kind of like, we fill out this bento, and then we kind of go around and we move around in a circular motion, and kind of like, okay, now me, future me, now us, future us. And we come back, and what's really interesting is when we do this and we kind of track it, the now me will be changing, right?
Right.
So what's good for me right now, because I've been living in the future us, and I know what's good for the future us, the now me might change a little bit, and it may tweak a little bit, and we can kind of move up that spectrum.
Perfect. So actually, when you start thinking about the future me or the future us, the steps that you take in the now automatically change, and that fundamentally takes you in the direction that you want to go. There's actually one thing that you talked about that I found very intriguing. When you talk about community, I had a recent talk with Palvashi Tariq, another executive coach, about on purpose. And what she said is purpose, when she talked about belief and your strengths and everything else. But she said the third part of what she said was, you really cannot have a purpose if it is not serving others.
Yes.
So, and I think what you just said in terms of this particular exercise is also talking about the community. And now when we talk about the community focus, right? While we'll come back to the future me in a little bit, in terms of, I have a few questions there, but talking about the community focus, why do you think that is important? Why do you want, let's say, how each of us as an individual should think about our actions more in terms of the whole and not as the individual?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we want safety, right? Like, our brains are wired to, like I said, safety right now. But when we step out of that for a moment, and then we like, okay, in order to be safe, I need my community to flourish, right? Because I need my community to be okay. Because if my community is not okay, then there's going to be like collateral damage on me. Like, if people are not doing well, like we think in a workplace, right? If it's like, okay, what about me, what about me, my career? But if it's a toxic environment in our workplace, in our culture, that's going to affect me. I'm going to go in every day, and I'm going to have to deal with that. And now I'm going to be stressed out. I'm going to be emotionally fragile. I'm not going to be able to do my job well. But if we have a workplace community that is whole and healthy and safe, then we're all going to do better at our work. We're all going to be happier and healthier. We're all going to be safe, and we're going to know that we're safe. And so, like, that's like this really great aspect of community. I mean, I think, like, I know we'll get to it in a little bit, but that's why I think of this village idea, because in a village, I realize that my future is also connected to your future. And my safety right now is connected to your safety right now. If you're not safe, if you're not doing well, that's going to affect me. Like, sometimes we like to think we live in these just isolated pockets of existence, but we don't. And so, like, it's so important to kind of broaden our mindsets to the community, to the village, to the workplace, to, whatever community we're kind of living in.
Perfect. And actually, now when you talked about the future me, you said the focus of the future me is on values. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that in terms of when we're doing this exercise? Let's assume I sit down today and try to fill this 2x2 matrix. When you say future me is based on values, what exactly do you mean?
Yeah, I think like the values that you want to live into. What's important to you? Like this is the purpose section, as you were talking about. This is the place where we define what do we want our purpose to be? What do we want to live into? You know, is sort of like are we going to be a thought leader? Are we going to we're going to think differently? You know, I in this book, Yancey outlines Apple's Bento model. He makes it up, but like based on Apple's values. And the now me for Apple was to give tools that advance humanity, right? Like that's what we're doing right now. That's how we're going to make profit. We're going to give people tools that advance humanity towards, you know, in technological directions. The future me for Apple is to think differently. That's our value, to think differently. That's what's going to help us succeed in the future. That's what we are. That's our purpose. And so like, we're always going to be like, how do we think differently here? Like sometimes we have our values, and if we don't write them down, then we can just forget them, right? When we get stressed, we forget our values. And Apple can be stressed and they can just fall into the patterns, what everybody else is doing. But then they come back to their bento and they're like, wait a minute, our future me is to think differently. Are we thinking differently right now? Or are we thinking just the same as everybody else? And so it's a great tool to kind of come back into our values.
Okay. So when you're, let's say, again, going to the Bento model, when you talk about the community and when you start putting things in the, let's say, the upper quadrant of in terms of us, what would you focus on when you actually talk about this particular model and you in relation to the community? Exactly what would go into those kind of boxes if you generally start doing this exercise?
Yeah, you put like what's important for my family? Like what values, what actions do I want for my values and for my family? You know, I think like a lot of times these are great. Like the bento is great for, say you're given an opportunity. Say you're given an offer at a new job or a career advancement. To now, like before we jump into that, let's think through this. Now, okay, how is that affecting the now me? Okay, is that good for me right now? Okay, yeah, that can be really good for me now. How about the future me? Well, cool. I mean, I'm going to make more money. I'm going to have more opportunity. That really fits into does this job fit into my values? Is it falling into my purpose, or is it not? And so like, yeah, okay, yeah, it's falling into my values. And then think about future us, or future me. And then we begin to think of like, well, maybe is this job going to require a lot of like time, effort, energy? Is it going to take me away from my family? What are the impacts there? Is that, well, okay, wait a minute. Now that might not be so good. This job might not be the best for when thinking about my community, my family, the surrounding people around me. It's like, oh, maybe I need to question this and really think through it. So like it's for specific examples, that's really where this can kind of come into, and we can fill out, because right, like we often jump at every opportunity, like that's great, yes. And we don't sort of think through our self-interest and our time of like, how is this good for, as I move over time, is this going to be good for me and for those things that I value around me?
Perfect. And I think so basically what I gathered with your response right now is it's not like a once and done. You can actually do the Bento model for your overall life. That's great. But actually you can apply it in a very specific context, focusing on almost like an evaluation of a, let's say, big key decision you're making about your life or your career. You can actually evaluate whether it is checking all the boxes or whether there's some boxes that it's not checking as well as it should.
Yes. And this is great for companies and teams as well. When you take on a new project of like, wow, this is a great project for us. We just got to sell. We got a new contract. Well, let's sit down as a team and think through this. Is this something we want to take on? Maybe it makes profit for us, but what are the costs here? Is it good for the now us? as a community? What's going to be required of us when we take on this new project? How is that going to add new stresses to the system? Is this going to affect our psychological safety? Is this going to affect our teamwork? How are we going to overcome the obstacles that we're facing? Now, the future, then we think of the future us. Is this going to leave an impact on the world and our company? Is this going to open new doors for us as a company and as teammates to advance ourselves in our career? Like now we're like thinking about not just profit right now, but thinking about how this is going to affect our whole life moving forward.
Perfect. That's great. I think we definitely have discussed Bento model to a good degree, right? And you can thank Yancy, and I'll also thank Yancy on LinkedIn.
Yes, thanks, Yancy.
And now let me actually go a little bit into your own journey, Jason, right? And I looked at your entire profile where you were a faith leader, you spent a lot of years, and then you, at some point in time, or a few years back, you made this move, and then you came up with this village mindset model. Why don't you give our listeners a little bit of your own journey from where you started to where you are right now, and how you came up with the village mindset model, and how the applicability of that is more pertinent now than ever?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as you say, I was a faith leader and in the nonprofit world for 20 years, and leading people in really hard situations and leading communities and like thousands of people at a time, and people with different self-interests and different experiences and different feelings about the world. And how do we bring people together for a common direction, to move in a common direction towards a common purpose? And so like that's really been my work over my half of life, really. But a couple of years ago, I thought, well, I'd love to do something else. And I really began to look sort of at the business community. And I looked at our world and thinking about future us, right? As I was looking at our world, I'm like, our world has some really big challenges ahead of it. I mean, our generation and the next generation, we're going to have massive challenges. Social unrest is going to become more, climate change is out there. And I looked at the sort of like the space that I was in, and I looked at the business community and the way the world runs. And I thought, the business community is the people that can change the world. Like that's the community that can make an impact on future us as a society. And so I was like, how do I take all the leadership qualities and all the ways that I've led communities over 20 years and bring them into the business world to help us frame that thinking, to change our thinking? Profit over, like the old way was profit over people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like that's we can't go there. That's now me. Mm-hmm. But we got to think about future us. And so we got to think about, how do we empower communities? How do we empower sustainability? And business has the capacity to do that if we change our values in the future me. Like we need to think that in terms of values. What are my values? What are our values here as a company? And so like I sat down and I thought about, okay, how do I help executive leaders understand this? And I have studied the brain. I have studied, I love neuroscience and how the brain works and functions. And the more and more I got into it, the more I understood that like we are wired for compassion. Like compassion is how we're going to get out of this mess. Compassion is the driver tool. And, sometimes I say compassion and we're like, oh, that mumbo jumbo, that's not important. Servant leadership, that's religious talk. Belonging sounds expensive. We don't want to do that. But like our brains are wired for it. Like literally we have this nerve. It's called the vagus nerve, and it runs through it's the largest nerve in our body. And this is science. You can look it up. And when we operate in compassion, we've shown studies at fires. It releases positive hormones all throughout our body. And we're happier, we're healthier, we're less stressed, and we get along better. Like evolutionarily, this is how we survived. We survived by helping one another. And the communities that helped one another survived. They thrived. And so like bringing this into the business qualities of the world, I've actually shown leaders, you can be a better leader, more effective leader, and you can advance your own career and your own influence by investing in empowering and having compassion with other people. There's this book. I know I'm talking crazy. I have so much information. There's this book called The Power Paradox. This professor at Berkeley did this study over many years of how people gained social power. Here's what he found. People gain power by helping other people. The people who help other people the most rise in society, in business, and in politics. Because when we help other people, we gain trust, right?
Right.
People trust us, we feel safe with them, and we're like, okay, they've got our best interests at heart. I'm going to let them be our leader. And so we rise. The paradox is that time and time again, once people get to the senior VP, the CEOs, the congressperson, we stop doing it. We stop helping other people. And
Yep.
like the whole point of the book is don't stop, keep helping people. Like we can help the world. And so like taking all this, and so I was thinking like, how do we frame this work for people to help them understand? And I thought about a village. Like we all love villages, right? We all are nostalgic about a village. And like, this is how a village works. When we empower and support and connect and live in purpose, and then we invest socially. And then again, we circle back. Like this is the functionality of a village, is how we live together in community, where we are seen, known, and valued, where we belong, where we have a purpose, where we are empowered, where this is and it can be a beautiful future.
Perfect. And actually, I love the quote that you mentioned. We rise by lifting others. I think that's a quote by Robert Ingersoll. And I loved. I think I found that entire one sentence that you actually said about belonging sounds expensive. That's pretty funny. And what you're talking about also resonates very well with, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Simon Sinek said in Start With Why that the focus should not be so much on the profits as much as it is about the people.
Yes.
And yeah, so when actually recently I wrote a small article in Medium on how to have these healthy relationships at work and why it's important for the productivity of people and stuff like that, which is where again the sense of the community thing is coming up, right? So in terms of the services that you offer, you actually do executive coachings or executive and team meetings around this topic. So when you approach, let's say, companies with this kind of thought process, how has the response been, and what are the things that, let's say, companies are thinking about or doing right now specific to the building of the community within their organizations?
Yeah, I mean, this is the topic right now, right? Like, how do we create belonging? I think coming out of COVID, everything has changed about leadership. Everything has changed about employee engagement, and companies are scrambling. And I think they're kind of realizing like we can't treat our employees like crap anymore. So what do we do? And like they're like, I don't know. So like having these conversations with executive leaders, I offer workshops for leaders. I offer coaching. I take team workshops to create like a whole team culture of belonging. And what I find is like we're kind of stuck in those models of the employees are the help here, right? They're like the VPs are the plantation owners and the employees are the help. So do your job, make us profit. Like, no. That's done. Like that way sunk in the midst of COVID is done. Right. And so what we have to do is we have to like mutually empower. Like you need to empower your employees. One of the questions I ask executives and HR people is like, this is a great example of some of the work I do, is when a team member tells you that they're going to quit, they're going to take another job, what's your reaction? And so often it's like, we're frustrated. We put so much time and effort into them. It's going to cost so much money to replace them. I'm like, here, this is your problem. I've just identified it. You don't value that person. You value what they do for you. You don't value them. And so you're treating them just on how productive they are. Now, what if we transition that and said, when somebody came to you and said, we're taking another job, you were like, great. Is it a good opportunity for you? Is it going to advance your career? Then fabulous. Awesome. How can we help you? How can we help you do that? How can we empower you to get to that next level? Because you know what? We live in a village, right? And in 5 years, that person that left you may come back as a senior VP if you treat them right on the way out. because like if you treat them right and empower them, then they're going to tell their friends. People are going to ask them, how was your time at the company? They're going to be like, you know what? They realized that there was no advancement for me in that place. So they actually found me a place in another company where I could advance. I learned the skills I needed. And then I came back because I love the culture so much. And now I'm a senior VP. Like, and like, how do we empower people to meet their dreams? And that's what servant leadership is. Servant leadership is not about bringing coffee or to our employees or, being nice. It's about putting them above ourselves and saying, how do I empower you to meet your dreams, to meet your goals, to meet your future you? And I'm going to do everything I can to do that. And you know what? When we do that, it creates belonging. It rises productivity. We have better cultures. We recruit better talent. We retain our employees longer because people actually like to work for us and know that we have their back. Like, it changes everything.
Perfect. And that's actually a great place to sort of conclude this particular podcast, Jason. Thank you very much for coming here. And this is Jason. You can reach him at jasonbutler.me or thevillagemindsetmodel.com. Jason, it was a pleasure having you here, and maybe there'll be other topics in the future that we'll talk about.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Take care.
See ya.
Bye.